Hello and welcome to Win Without Law School. I'm Arizona lawyer Julie Labenz. Today we're going to talk about how to create a child support case strategy in a divorce case. So thank you so much for joining us. We're going to cover 5 different lessons today in the lecture. Part 1 is going to be about how and why to create a child support case strategy. And then we'll get into Arizona's child support guidelines. We're going to talk about specific parts of the guidelines that will be helpful to you. In part 3, we'll get into how to use Arizona's current child support calculator. In part 4, I'll show you how to create a child support worksheet. And part 4 and 5 will be combined. We'll go through how to create a worksheet, how to create a proposed child support order, and also how to create an income withholding order. So we'll go through all of that today. All right, so let's start with part 1, why and how to create a child support case strategy. Having a child support case strategy helps you get clear about your desired outcome. So this can be so helpful for many different things. Maybe you're wondering, wow, what is child support going to be? What am I going to need to pay? Or what can I expect to receive? If you can start running some calculations, that's going to give you an idea of what the number may look like. So that can be really helpful. Additionally, if you're looking to engage in negotiations with the other side, or you go to court and the judge asks you what you're looking for in child support, you're going to have a number. So you're going to be able to engage in negotiations with your opposing party, and you're also going to be able to tell the judge what you're requesting. With a child support case strategy, you can determine if you're adopting a reasonable position or not. So, if you don't have a calculation run, you may be saying, oh, I want $800 a month in child support, and maybe all you're entitled to is 100. And of course, 800 would be unreasonable. So once you can get into the calculator and start running some calculations, you can get an idea of what a reasonable amount is in your case. So in creating a child support case strategy, you're going to be figuring out the amount of child support you're asking the court to order. There's also a couple of additional points that come up under this category of child support, and that's going to be dividing uncovered medical expenses, who's going to pay for medical insurance for the kids, and how are you going to divide the child tax exemptions. So all of that gets discussed under child support. Now, let's talk about some of the premises of Arizona's 2022 child support guidelines. That's the most recent version of the guidelines, to clear up any potential misconceptions that may be out there. So number 1, these guidelines apply to all children for whom there is a legal obligation to support. The support of other persons, such as stepchildren, is considered voluntary and does not impact the child support determined under the guidelines. The child support obligation has priority over all other financial obligations. Non-support financial obligations generally do not affect the child support obligation except for as provided in these guidelines. The fact that a parent receives child support does not mean that he or she may not also be entitled to spousal maintenance. So there's no direct connection. And in fact, you'll see as we get into this that the payer, someone paying spousal maintenance and someone receiving spousal maintenance, there's a credit for that within the child support calculator. In some circumstances, a parent who has more parenting time than the other parent may be ordered to pay child support. So if there's a vast difference between the parents' incomes, then even though one parent may have more parenting time, if they make a lot more money than the other parent, they could potentially still be ordered to pay child support. The obligation to pay and the right to receive child support is separate from any rights or responsibilities relating to legal decision-making or parenting time. A violation of court-ordered legal decision-making or parenting time does not serve as a defense to nor an excuse for not paying child support. So there's a connection between child support and parenting time, because in the child support calculator, it considers parenting time in there. And we'll get into that in today's discussion, but that's the extent of it. If you don't exercise parenting time, that doesn't mean you don't have to pay child support, for example. So a violation of legal decision-making or parenting time does not serve as a defense to nor an excuse for not paying child support. A parent receiving child support is presumed to spend his or her share directly on the child, so there's no accounting that needs to be done. The person receiving child support doesn't have to show that they're spending the money on the child. That's just presumed. Once the court orders child support, the child support must be paid in money. Gifts of clothing or other types of gifts in lieu of money are not to be offset against the child support order unless the court orders otherwise. So keep that in mind. It should be straight money. If there's going to be, oh, I just bought these clothes, or I just bought this food, or I just bought these diapers, there may not be a credit for that unless the court orders. So be cognizant of that. All right, let's get into part 2, which is Arizona's child support guidelines. In these guidelines, we're going to talk about how to determine each parent's gross income. We're going to talk about potential adjustments. So what payments can each parent get credit for in the child support calculator? And we're going to talk about the option of deviating from the calculator amount. So if the calculator amount comes out to, for example, $100 a month, and you want to either reduce it to 50 or increase it to 150 per month, for example, that would be called a deviation. So we'll talk about how to deviate up or down from the calculator amount. Now, before I get into these definitions and explanations under the support guidelines, I want to show you what a child support worksheet looks like. So what the calculator looks like, and then you turn that into a worksheet. So calculator and worksheet, those words can really be used. They can be intertwined. They can mean the same thing. But I'm going to go to that screen. So just one second here. Okay, so this is a child support worksheet. And you can see this is based on the 2022 guidelines. So when you complete a worksheet, which we're going to go through that, or when you complete a calculator that you turn into this worksheet, we're going to go through that in today's lecture. You'll be able to populate these areas with the name of the petitioner, the name of the respondent, the case number, eventually when you have that, and then also the dates of birth, names and ages of your children. That information will be in here. And then you'll start out with the parenting plan. Are the kids mostly with parent A? Are the kids mostly with parent B? Or is there an essentially equal division of parenting time? From there, you've got income. So parent A's income on a monthly, annually, or hourly basis. And then whether that's their actual income or if it's what we call attributed, which means it's what they are capable of making, whether or not they're actually making that amount right now. So same for parent B, their current gross income. And then here's where we start getting into adjustments. Spousal maintenance being paid or received, support of other children, if you have other children. And then down here, there's an adjustment for medical, dental, and vision insurance, monthly childcare costs, extra education expenses, extraordinary gifted or special needs child expenses. And then if you don't have an equal parenting plan, you can count up the amount of parenting time days for the parent that has less parenting time, and that goes in here. And then with all of those numbers, you eventually get amount of child support. So I wanted to just show you the context of what we're now going to go over as far as what's in the guidelines. So we're going to talk about how to determine the income, what gets put in for these other adjustments, and how to determine parenting days and all of that. So let's now go back to the slides. Okay, so now we're back to the slides and let's move on to our next slide here. All right, how do you determine each parent's gross income for the child support calculator? Let's look at types of gross income you can use in Arizona's child support calculator. Number one, you can use an hourly rate. Currently, Arizona's minimum wage is $13.85 per hour, and pay stubs show an employee's hourly rate. So you can look, if you can get access to pay stub, that's going to show an hourly rate. You can use a gross monthly income. And let's say somebody only gets paid 6 months out of the year at a particular job. You can annualize that to get a gross monthly income. And I'll show you how to do that in some of the later slides. You can also use an annual gross income. You can look at tax returns for that. However, keep in mind that gross income for tax return purposes isn't the same necessarily for child support purposes. What's included in gross income? The term child support income does not have the same meaning as gross income or adjusted gross income for tax purposes. The effect of taxes has been considered in the Schedule of Basic Support Obligations. So you may initially think, wow, why are we using gross income? That seems really unfair because I have to pay taxes on that. However, what this is telling you is that within the calculator, taxes are taken into consideration. So you are getting credit within the calculator for the taxes you'll need to pay on your gross income. Child support income includes income from any source before any deductions or withholdings. Child support income may include salaries, wages, commissions, bonuses, dividends, severance pay, military pay, pensions, interest, trust income, annuities, capital gains, Social Security benefits, workers' compensation benefits, unemployment insurance benefits, disability benefits, military disability benefits, recurring gifts, prizes, and spousal maintenance. So as you can see, the definition is very broad. And so nearly any type of income is going to be considered when determining gross income for child support purposes. Seasonal or fluctuating income within a year, that type of income is going to be annualized to determine the average monthly child support income. And all of this information that I'm quoting from, this is from the 2022 Arizona Child Support Guidelines. How do you annualize seasonal income? Here's an example. Sean is a teacher and is paid only 9 months a year. Sean is paid $7,000 a month from September through May and is not paid for the months of June, July, and August. The earnings must be annualized as follows. Multiply the monthly income by the number of months the parent is paid to arrive at the annual earnings. So $7,000 per month for 9 months is $63,000. Then take that number and divide by 12 to arrive at the average monthly child support income. So 63,000 divided by 12 is 5,250 a month. So that would be the amount put in the monthly gross income for this example. All right, more on what's included in gross income. The court has discretion as to whether or not to consider non-continuing or non-recurring income. The court also has discretion to average fluctuating income over periods exceeding 1 year. Income from self-employment, rent, royalties, proprietorship of a business, or joint ownership of a partnership or closely held corporation means gross receipts minus ordinary and necessary expenses as determined by the court to be required to produce income. Ordinary and necessary expenses include 1/2 of the self-employment tax actually paid. So if you or your spouse have a business, have rental income, receive royalties, then you're going to look at the gross receipts minus ordinary and necessary expenses minus 1/2 the self-employment tax actually paid. So if you're dealing with this situation where you or your spouse is self-employed or, is receiving this type of income where you get to deduct some expenses first in calculating total gross income, then you may need to do a little more, discovery disclosure to determine this final amount of income you're going to need to get either for yourself or from your spouse, their ordinary and necessary expenses, as well as their gross receipts, and 1/2 of the self-employment tax actually paid so that you can do this calculation. So keep in mind that if you're in this situation, then you may not be ready to calculate child support as easily or, as soon as somebody who, as when you're dealing with spouses who both get income on an hourly basis through a salary, because you'll just be able to look at their paychecks and get all the information you need. Expense reimbursements or benefits a parent receives in the course of employment, self-employment, or their operation of a business are included as child support income if they are significant and reduce personal living expenses. Cash value is assigned to in-kind or other non-cash employment benefits. So if, for example, your employer or your business pays for your cell phone, then the amount paid per month for your cell phone, that can be added to your gross income if that reduces your personal living expenses and it's significant. Continuing or recurring military entitlements, including but not limited to basic allowance housing and basic allowances subsistence, are child support income. Military provided housing is an in-kind or other non-cash employment benefit. So for anything where it's not clear what the actual monetary value of that benefit is, then a cash value gets assigned to it. So military provided housing, if you don't know, because we don't know what that's worth. Well, what is a reasonable amount of rent that would be paid if they weren't in military housing? What's not included in gross income? Sums a parent receives as child support, welfare benefits, such as temporary assistance to needy families, supplemental Social Security income, food stamps, and general assistance. Sums a parent receives by or for the benefit of a minor child, including adoption subsidies, supplemental Social Security income, and subsidies arising from the disability of a child, are not support income, but may affect a parent's support obligation, as explained in another section. So if you're in that situation, look at that additional section. Also, the court does not consider how marital property is distributed between the parents, except to the extent that such property generates income. If a person does not have a legal duty to support a child, that person's income is not included as child support income. So a new spouse, a step parent, their income is not included when calculating child support. How about overtime? A court generally does not include more income than earned through full-time employment. Each parent should have the choice of working additional hours through overtime or at a second job without increasing child support. A parent who historically worked overtime when the family was intact may choose to reduce or not to work overtime hours to ensure meaningful interaction with their children during their parenting time. The court may consider income actually earned if it is greater than would have been earned by full-time employment, if that income was historically earned and is anticipated to continue into the future. The court generally does not attribute additional income to a parent if it would require an extraordinary work regimen. So if there's income above and beyond a paycheck, here's some ins and outs about what may or may not be included in gross income. Now, what if you or your co-parent is unemployed or underemployed? That's where we can get into this concept known as attributing income. So when is child support income attributed, even if it's not actually being earned? Generally, attributed child support income is not income actually earned or received, but instead is an assigned income based on a court finding regarding the amount that should be used to calculate child support. In accordance with the Arizona Revised Statutes, section 25-320, subsection N, the court presumes that a parent is capable of full-time employment of at least the applicable state or federal adult minimum wage, whichever is higher. When the court attributes minimum wage earnings to a person, it usually considers full-time employment to consist of 40 hours per week. Minimum wage is attributed in this matter as a result of the self-support reserve test. However, a court may consider fewer hours to be full-time if a person is earning more than minimum wage. So if your co-parent is unemployed, but they're capable of earning minimum wage, then you can attribute that to them in the calculator. If they're earning minimum wage, but they have a history of making more than that, you could seek to attribute more than that to them. However, you in that event, if they contest it, you may need to show why, other jobs that are available that are at a higher rate that they would qualify for. In general, you're looking at what is the amount per hour, per month, or per year that you or your co-parent are capable of earning, and that's really available to you. That is an amount that can be attributed. If the court attributes income, that should be stated in the order and worksheet. So these are the factors a court considers if it's going to attribute income. It's going to look at the parent's assets, residence, employment, earning history, job skills, educational attainment, literacy, age, health, criminal record, and other employment barriers and record of seeking work, along with the job market. When a parent is unemployed or underemployed, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, the court must consider the reasons. In determining whether to attribute income, the court considers the child's best interest and all other relevant factors. So, we looked at this last slide where the court's going to look at, what are your job skills? What are your barriers to employment? What's your employment history? And then also looking at the job market, is it realistic to say you're capable of getting a particular type of job? Is that job really available in today's job market? And then also, the court's going to look at these additional factors. If you are unemployed or earning less than you're capable of, and it's involuntary, then is it reasonable for that parent to find replacement income above actual earnings? If your unemployment is voluntary with reasonable cause, then should that parent's decision and its benefits outweigh the effect that the reduced income has on the child's best interests? If the unemployment is voluntary and without good cause, whether income attribution is appropriate, and if the parent has the ability to find suitable work in the marketplace at a greater income based on the parent's current educational level, training, and experience and physical capacity. So really just trying to infuse fairness into this situation. If the court is going to attribute income, then the law really wants to make sure that that is something that's fair to do in the circumstances, looking at the parent's capabilities, job history, earnings history, the current job market, and then what's best for the child, what's suitable in the circumstances, whether attributing income is really appropriate. When is income not attributed? Well, number one, if a parent is incarcerated. Also, if a parent is physically or mentally disabled, if the parent is engaged in reasonable career or occupational training, and if there's unusual emotional or physical needs of a natural or adopted child common to the parties, if that child requires the parent's presence in the home, or a parent is the caretaker of a young child common to the parties and the cost of childcare is prohibitive. So the court will not attribute income if a person's incarcerated and they don't have an actual ability to pay. If they're physically or mentally disabled and that prevents them from working, they're in school and they're getting education to enhance their earning capability. There's a child common to the party and the child has unusual emotional or physical needs that requires the parent to be at home, or the parent is the caretaker to a young child that's common to the parties and the cost of childcare is prohibitive. So in these circumstances, the court is not going to attribute income. All right, we talked about determining gross income. Now let's talk about adjustments. What credits can you get in the child support calculator for money you're spending related to children you have in common? Number one, spousal maintenance. If you're paying or receiving spousal maintenance, that can be an adjustment in the calculator. Also, if you have children that aren't in common, so children of other relationships, you can get a credit in the calculator for that. The payment of medical insurance just for the children, though. Oftentimes, medical insurance is paid for you and your children. You'll need to separate out the amount that's only paid for your children. Payment of childcare expenses, payment of education expenses, and payment of extraordinary childcare expenses. And then you can get a parenting time adjustment. And then any of these expenses that don't happen every month, those can be annualized. All right, let's get into a bit more detail on some of these adjustments. So let's talk about the medical insurance adjustment. An order for child support assigns responsibility for providing medical insurance for the child who is subject of the child support order. So one parent will be ordered to provide medical insurance for the child. In determining the amount to be added, to the extent possible, only the amount of the insurance cost attributable to the child subject to this child support order is included. If coverage is applicable to the child and other persons, the total cost is prorated by the number of persons covered. So if you have a medical insurance and it covers you and your child, then you need to figure out how much of that amount is just for your child. And if you don't know, then you can prorate it. In other words, divide the amount by 2. So if the coverage covered 3 people, you would divide the amount by 3. And then for 2/3, assuming 2/3, you have 2 kids, 2/3 of that amount would be included in the child support worksheet. Unless otherwise agreed, if medical insurance of comparable benefits and cost is available to both parents, the order assigns responsibility to the parent who has the greater amount of parenting time. If the parents share essentially equal parenting time, the court assigns responsibility after considering all other factors. So let's say you and your spouse both have medical insurance through your work that could cover you and your kids. And if you don't have equal parenting time, then the parent who has the majority of the parenting time, then they would cover medical insurance for the kids. If the parents share essentially equal parenting time, then if the parents can't agree on who's going to provide the medical insurance, then the court would decide. If a parent is assigned the obligation to provide medical insurance, that responsibility may be fulfilled by family coverage provided by a step-parent or domestic partner. In such a case, adjustment for the cost of the step-parent is appropriate. So this isn't a divorce, so you're not going to have a step-parent in a divorce, but post-divorce, years down the road, if you or your co-parent get remarried and their new spouse has great coverage and you guys want to switch to that, this is letting you know that that is an option. And that would get credited to the parent married to the step parent that's going to provide the coverage. They would get credit in the calculator. A parent is not obligated to provide dental and vision insurance, but if a parent provides such insurance, they get credit for that in the calculator. So it's just health insurance. Dental and vision is not required, but if you do provide that, you can get a credit for that. The court may decline to credit a parent for medical, dental, or vision insurance coverage obtained for the child if the coverage is not valid in the geographic region where the child resides, which makes sense, right? All right, another adjustment you can get is for childcare expenses. The amount paid for childcare so a parent can work or seek employment may be added to the child support worksheet. If both parents incur childcare expenses, the amount each incurs may be added to the calculator. Unless the court orders otherwise, expenses must be paid to someone who is not being claimed as a dependent. So keep that in mind. You can't have, let's say you have an adult child and they're going to be your child care. If you claim them as a dependent on your taxes, then you can't get a credit for that payment in the child support calculator. The child care adjustment must be appropriate to the parent's financial abilities. So you're not going to be able to go out and get the most expensive child care and then throw that in the worksheet just to increase the child support calculation. The child care amount needs to be, appropriate to you and your co-parents' financial abilities. Child care expenses are annualized. So if you're not incurring them 12 months a year, you'd annualize that amount to determine the amount of the credit in the calculator. Okay, how about education expenses? What qualifies? Any reasonable and necessary expenses for attending private or special schools or necessary expenses to meet the particular educational needs of a child if such expenses are incurred by agreement of both parties or court ordered. So one parent can't go out and just put the child in a private school and then get a credit for that or demand the other side pay for half. Both parents will need to agree. And if that's the case, then the parent paying gets a credit in the child support calculator. If both parents are paying, then they both get a credit. Also, education expenses will be annualized, like we talked about earlier. And then there's extraordinary expenses. So the guidelines are designed to fit the needs of most children. The basic child support obligation may be adjusted to provide for costs incurred for a gifted or special needs child. If benefits are paid to a parent to assist in meeting a child's needs, such as those described in another section, the adjustment for the cost may not be appropriate. So if your child has extra education expenses for a tutor, for example, but you're getting state assistance that's paying for that tutor, then you don't get credit for the cost of that tutor in the worksheet. And again, if your extraordinary child expense is not incurred every month, then it can be annualized. Okay, parenting time. This only applies if you have a non-equal parenting plan. Okay, so you're not 50-50. If you are 50-50, you check that box in the worksheet and it's all set. This only applies if one parent has the majority of the parenting time. Even if the parents share essentially equal parenting time, a parent may still owe child support to the other parent if one parent's adjusted income is higher than the others or the expenses are not equally shared. So just as a side note, keep in mind, even if you have essentially equal, child support could still be owed. But this parenting time adjustment, this is only going to apply if you have a non-50-50 plan. So add up the total parenting time days for the parent with less parenting time. Now, you may have a question about how to calculate the days if it's not clear cut. So this is going to give you some guidance. Parenting time is calculated based on the segments of time that are assigned to each parent. The parenting time for either parent begins at the time of exchange of the child from one parent to the other, unless otherwise provided in the court order. If the exchange occurs at school or with a caregiver, the receiving parent's time commences at the end of the day. Conversely, the other parent segment ends at the same time. So here's an example. Riley and Blair have one child. School days for this example begin with a drop-off at school at 8:30 a.m. and the school day ends at 3 p.m. The exchange of the child between Riley and Blair occurs at school and is tied to the school day. Riley is entitled to parenting time beginning at the end of the school day on Monday through drop-off at school on Wednesday morning, which is 8:30 a.m. Blair's parenting time begins at the end of the school day at Wednesday, which is 3 p.m. In determining Riley's parenting time segment, Riley is deemed to have the child from 3 p.m. on Monday until 3 p.m. on Wednesday. Riley, therefore, has 2 days of parenting time in this segment. To adjust for the cost of parenting time, first determine the total annual amount of parenting time indicated in a court order, a parenting plan, by the parent's expectation or by historical practice. Use the following for guidance. Add together each block of parenting time to arrive at the total number of parenting time days per year. Calculate the number of parenting time days arising from any block of time the child spends with the parent with less parenting time in the following manner. Count 1 day of parenting time for each 24 hours with any block of time. To the extent there is a period of less than 24 hours, then a period of 12 hours or more is 1 day. A period of 6 to 11 hours is a half day. 3 to 5 hours is a quarter of a day. And less than 3 hours may count as a quarter of a day if during those hours the parent with less parenting time pays for routine expenses such as meals. All right, let's look at some examples. Bailey and Jules have one child. Bailey has less parenting time than Jules. In alternating weeks, Bailey receives the child at 8 p.m. on Thursday and returns the child to Jules at 7 a.m. on Monday. 8 p.m. Thursday to 8 p.m. Sunday is 3 days. 8 p.m. Sunday to 8 a.m. Monday is 11 hours, which equals a half day. Total parenting time for Bailey is 3.5 days for that alternating week. Here's another example. Alex and Kendall have one child. Alex has less parenting time than Kendall. Alex picks the child up at 3 p.m. Friday and returns the child to Kendall at 8 a.m. on Monday. 3 p.m. Friday to 3 p.m. Sunday is 2 days. 3 p.m. Sunday to 8 a.m. Monday is 17 hours, which equals 1 day. Total parenting time for Alex is 3 days that week. Final example. Angel and Harper have one child. Angel has less parenting time than Harper. Angel picks up the child at noon on Saturday and returns the child to Harper at 9 p.m. on Sunday. Noon Saturday to noon Sunday is 1 day. Noon Sunday to 9 p.m. Sunday is 9 hours, which equals a half day. Total parenting time for Angel is 1.5 days for that week. All right, now let's talk about deviations. A deviation occurs when a court orders child support in an amount different from the amount in the worksheet. The court must deviate if it finds all of the following criteria are met. Applying the guidelines, so using the worksheet amount, is inappropriate or unjust. The court has considered the child's best interests, and the court makes written findings about number 1 and 2. The court shows what the order would have been without the deviation, and the court shows what the order is after deviating. The court can deviate from the guidelines based on the parties' agreement if it finds that the agreement is in writing or stated on the record, the parties know the amount before and after the deviation, there's no duress or coercion, and then the court complies with what we had on the last slide. So the court determines this is in the child's best interest, the court looks at the amount before and after the deviation, and the court determines that applying the guidelines would be unjust. let's look at some circumstances that may warrant a deviation. And just to be clear, a deviation means taking the child support calculation amount and either increasing it or decreasing it to a certain amount. So a deviation could be warranted if there's a significant disparity of income and each parent has significant parenting time. The combined income exceeds $30,000 per month, and there is a significant disparity in income between the parents. One parent is paying a disproportionate share of the child's expenses, and there is significant parenting time for each parent. The parenting plan will require a parent to incur significant travel expenses related to parenting time, and the cost thereof in combination with child support may impede the parent's ability to exercise parenting time. The payment of child support would compromise the parent's ability to receive and afford out-of-pocket necessary and extraordinary health care or mental health services, or unusual emotional or physical needs of a natural or adopted child not common to the parties if that child requires that parent's presence in the home. And then keep in mind, it's not a deviation to round off the monthly child support amount for ease of accounting. It's not a deviation to compromise on any individual figure incorporated in the guidelines calculation, such as parenting time. It's not a deviation to reduce the child support order based on the self-reserve test. And then it's not a deviation to order 0 child support if the monthly child support amount would be less than $8. That's the current clearinghouse fee. Okay, so we're going to return to the calculator. And just as a review, in order to calculate child support, you need each parent's gross income on an hourly, monthly, or annual basis, and then all adjustments, which can be for spousal maintenance, other children, health insurance, childcare, education, extraordinary expenses, and then the parenting time adjustment. Once you've got your calculation done, then you can create a worksheet, a child support order, and an income withholding order. And so now I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay, so here we are at the child support worksheet. This is the calculator, the worksheet. It can go by either name. And what you'll see here is this top part where you're going to enter some initial information. Now, since you're at the case strategy point, you don't have a case number yet, so that's fine. Here, you can select your county. So let's say you're in Maricopa, you can put that there. If you have what's called a 4D case, meaning you or your spouse has received welfare benefits and the state's involved, you can check this box. Here, you'll write in, if you're the petitioner, your name. Here, you write in the name of the respondent. So I'm just going to put some names in. Jane Doe, John Doe, and then your children and their dates of birth. August. Okay, so we've got 2 kids listed. And then you'll see their ages automatically populate. So we've got the 12-year-old and the 10-year-old. So now the next selection is for your parenting plan. You're going to do parent A if you're proposing that parent A have the majority of the parenting time. You're going to do parent B if you're proposing parent B have the majority of the parenting time, Or if you're proposing an essentially equal parenting plan, then you'll check the equal box. And we're going to start there. And then you go into income. So this is parent A, their gross monthly income on a monthly, annually, or hourly basis. So let's put parent A at $20 an hour. And then parent B, let's put them at Arizona's minimum wage, which is $13.85. Now, if we were using an attributed income, you would check one of these boxes for that. Okay. All right, then if spousal maintenance is being received, let's say by parent B, they're getting through in the divorce, parent A needs to pay parent B $100 per month in spousal maintenance, then that would be put there. And then parent A would get credit for paying it. Notice that the payer's amount is put in a parenthesis because that's being deducted from their income. And then the person receiving, there's no parenthesis, and you can see that here. Okay. Then child support. If parent A is paying child support, and this is for another relationship, so this is a child not in common with parent B, and let's say they're paying $100, can get credit for that. Now, this number, I don't believe you need to put in a parenthesis because it does it automatically. All right. Also, let's say parent B has a child from another relationship that lives in their household. Now, this is optional. See, there's a may here. So we're going to put that there, but this is optional. They don't have to get credit for that. So that's something you can play around with in creating your strategy. All right. Now, let's move that. Now we get into more adjustments. Medical insurance. Say parent A is going to pay $150 a month to cover both children. Oh, so we don't need to do the negative. Sorry about that. 150. These kids are older, 10 and 12. There's no childcare costs. They don't have any extra education expenses, nor do they have any gifted or special needs expenses. Now, we did check the box for equal parenting time, so we do not need to put in any sort of parenting adjustment. And then you can see here is our presumptive. Let me move this box. Here's our presumptive amount of child support. For parent A to pay parent B $109 per month. Now, if parent A says, oh, 109, that's a weird amount. I want it to be 110. You can come up here, round without deviation, 110. Now it's rounded up. Now, if child support, if you believe you're owed child support begins to be owed when the parents start living apart. So if you and your spouse have stopped living together and you haven't been getting any child support and you're due this 110 a month, you can put information in this past support here about what you think you're owed. Now, generally, you'll need to file in order for you to start making a request for past support. So just keep that in mind. Now, here is where the amount of spousal maintenance is getting taken into account, and then the clearinghouse fee. This shows the date for a payment to start. Now, of course, you're just creating a case strategy, so this date isn't going to apply, but you can, if you're really organized, you could select an alternate start date. Now, based on the parents' incomes, there's these percentages that the calculator comes up with. So what this is saying is that for any uninsured medical expenses that the children incur, parent A should pay 62% of that, and parent B should pay 38%. Also, if there's any transportation expenses related to parenting time, it's the same division. But what if you don't want to do that? What if you want a 50-50 division? Then, oh, this is who's going to provide insurance. You can do that if it's parent A or parent B. But here, enter a different percentage. So you want to do 50. So see that? That's how you can change the percentage if you want to do that. Okay, also, the calculator will give a proposed division for the child tax exemptions. However, you can customize it. So right now it's saying parent A should claim max every year. Parent B should claim Olivia 2 out of every 3 years. But you can customize it if you don't want to do the recommended division. Okay. I'm going to come back up here. Now, let's say you're in a situation where you don't have an essentially equal parenting plan. And it's a situation where parent A has the majority of the parenting time. Okay. We're going to leave the incomes the same. I'm going to leave everything the same. But now we get to put in the amount of parenting time that parent B has. So let's say we've added that up and just here. And we're going to give them 120 parenting days a year. Didn't change the calculation. Now you can see at 150 days, it does. And now this is where you can do some strategizing around parenting days and child support. You can play around with this and see where the change happens. Okay, so okay, so there it is. 142 versus 143 makes a huge difference. Look at that. At 142, you're at basically 250 bucks. At 143, you're at 142. So big difference there. It isn't always that big, but you can see the number of parenting time days can have a drastic impact on the final amount of child support. And so that if you're the one looking to pay child support, that can be a part of your strategy, because here, obviously, you're going to want to make a parenting plan proposal that has you at least 143 days, because what a difference that makes. So playing around with this parenting time adjustment can be really helpful. Also, remember this credit for the other child, that is discretionary. So that could come out, and then that is also going to have an impact on the final number. So there are different things that can be done in here that can drastically change the outcome. And this is where strategizing can be really helpful. Also, there's this income attribution issue. So maybe you have this situation where it's like, well, I don't want to use minimum wage because I think they're actually capable of making 15 an hour. And that's going to be your attributed amount. And then, play around with that. So there's a lot that you can do here. Once you have your final numbers, you're like, okay, this is what I want to do. Well, then that's where you're going to print out this worksheet. Okay, so you'll go File, Save as PDF, Print. That's how you're going to create that worksheet. And then if you look down here, you'll see Child Support Order. So you can click on this tab, and the information you put in the worksheet, it's populating into the child support order. So you've got your county, the names of your parties. If you'd put a case number in, that would come in, or that would have populated in. And then you've got the names of the children, their dates of birth, the child support amount. And then remember, I had put that part in the worksheet down here for this round without deviation. So really this should be more like 260 based on the amount, but that's why you can see how all these amounts connect through the spreadsheets, which is really cool. So if you'd put anything into past support, that would populate here. It shows the amount to be paid, the date it starts, the clearinghouse fee, how it's paid. And then remember, we click the button for 50-50 on these divisions, but let's go back. and just take this out. And we can see that that is the recommended percentage division of uninsured medical costs for the children and travel costs for parenting over 100 miles away, which is not going to apply in every case because not every parent lives 100 miles away. Here's the division of those expenses. And then we've got the tax exemptions here, which has parent B claiming Max every year and parent A claiming Olivia every year. That'll get signed by the judge. And then here's this income withholding order. So this is an order to the payer of the child support, to their employer, instructing the employer to withhold the amount of child support from each paycheck and send it to the clearinghouse. And then the clearinghouse pays that amount to the person who's set to receive the child support. So this is another form, and this is how you create that form. So you can see all the forms you need are right here. And it all starts with creating your worksheet. Okay, so let's go back. Let's go back and just finish up these slides. Okay. And we're going to finish them up with a summary of what we just talked about. To calculate child support, you'll first need to determine each parent's gross income. You can consider attributing income if either parent qualifies for that in your case. Account for any adjustments, such as spousal maintenance, support for other children, medical insurance, childcare expenses, education expenses, extraordinary expenses, then parenting time if you have a non-50-50 parenting agreement. And even if you don't have an agreement yet, if that's what you're going to propose, then I would do a calculation based on your parenting plan proposal. Consider deviating up or down if that makes sense in your case. And then create your child support worksheet, create the child support order, review the child tax exemptions, review the division of the uncovered medical expenses, and then create an income withholding order. All right. Thank you so much. I hope that was helpful. And if you have any questions, then please bring those to our live Q&A session.